Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. For today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Transformers Studio Series 15th Anniversary Autobots Arrival 5-pack. Probably one of the coolest releases that Hasbro have ever put out for this line, and it's fantastic for so many reasons. For those who are unable to pick up some of the more elusive characters such as Ironhide and Optimus Prime, this is a great second opportunity, and for those who are perhaps brand new to the Studio Series and considering these characters were originally released in some of the earlier waves, this is a great opportunity in picking the entire cast up in one box set. Not to mention that some of the new paint decos that these characters have are vastly superior when in comparison to their original counterparts. Now, we're going to kickstart things off by taking a look at the leader of the Autobots himself, Optimus Prime, and just in general I think the molds that they've decided to use for this box set are by far some of the best that we've seen for these characters in the 15 years of the live action movie. So here we have the Studio Series 32 Optimus Prime, and this thing is god tier. This is an amazing figure, and I think this time round with a much more vibrant colour scheme, it really does put to shame the Studio Series 05 release. Now, it's not without its issues, and I'll go into those details in just a second, but the attention to detail that we have here for the head sculpt is just amazing. We've got so much silver. I think the chest piece also looks fantastic. I really like how they've actually tinted out the windows this time round in comparison to the original version, which merely just had clear plastic. The chest all looks great. We've got some nice silver details to accentuate some of the mechanical components that we have embedded within the torso, and unlike the original version of this character, we actually do get the Energon blades than as opposed to the ion blasters, and these things in themselves just look insane. We've got a really deep vibrant orange used for the blade itself with some amazing metallic silver highlights to pick out some of the sharper details of the sculpt. I really like how they do peg into the underside of the fists, and as we come around here to the back, this section is just way more accurate when in comparison to the Studio Series 05. And one thing worth mentioning is that they have taken the tooling from the Dark of the Moon reissue in the sense that these pieces are actually pinned on, so are nowhere near as easily detachable when in comparison to that original 32 release. Now, as we come down here to the legs, truth be told, this is where I think this pack kind of falls flat on its face. Some of these figures are amazing paint-wise, but there are some, such as Optimus and Bumblebee, the prime characters in this set, which I think have been massively let down, and I have no idea as to why they've left the shins and the feet completely grey. Now, granted, the feet don't look too bad, but this just looks straight up terrible. It really does look unfinished, and considering that this is a 15th anniversary box set, I would have loved for Hasbro to have given us the most premium paint deco on these characters that we've ever seen, but personally I'll be sticking this guy in with Jetfire to create Jet Power Prime after the review. But still, nice looking details. I do like the way this guy comes together. He's definitely one of the better Optimus Primes that we've seen in recent years, so a great entry into the Studio Series line. The next character I want to take a look at is one of my personal favourites, not only in terms of the movie, but in terms of a Studio Series release, and it is Ironhide. I know there are so many of you out there that are absolutely thrilled to be given a second opportunity in owning undeniably one of the more elusive figures that has ever been released, and for good reason. The mold in itself is incredible. This guy looks insane. Now, as we take a look here at the details of the head sculpt, this is just so nicely done, and in many ways this figure actually puts its masterpiece counterpart to shame. I think the attention to detail where kind of that asymmetrical design lays with the eyes is super nice. You'll notice that when in comparison to the verse version, they have just painted this piece in silver than as opposed to blue, which I think works out pretty nicely. The eye that is painted, however, really does have a super cool metallic blue flake to it, and you can see here for these roundel sections on the side of the ears, they've too been fully painted. I think the chest looks great. We've got this really nice grey piece here smack bang in the centre, which was absent on the first version, and some super cool metallic silver highlights on these chest pieces. And I mean, just check out the chest in itself. This is so nicely done, leaps and bounds better when in comparison to the masterpiece. Now, granted, we still do sadly have the bumper. I don't think Hasbro are ever going to retool this unless we actually get a standalone release of this guy as a Dark of the Moon reissue, but the cannons also look really nicely done. Gunmetal grey here for the plastic with some super cool metallic silver highlights for the actual cannons themselves, and I think the detailing on this one is just as nice as the opposite side. I love the way the wheels actually compress within the torso, and as we come down here to the legs, this also looks fantastic. I really don't have many complaints here at all. Initially, I was slightly turned off by these bizarre grey pieces that we have kind of for the knees, but this is actually accurate to the movie. Ironhide does have grey pieces here, so I guess that's pretty neat. And as we take a look here at the feet, the toes have been fully painted in metallic silver, which I think looks fantastic front to back. Now, granted, they maybe could have got rid of the underside paint and actually painted the clearance lights here on on the back, but still a very nicely done looking figure, super solid and looks incredible. Now as we move down a scale class now to the deluxe figures, here we have Ratchet, once again inspired by that 2007 movie, and this is a marked improvement too when in comparison to its original release, and it all has to do with the new deco that we have here for the head. This looks leaps and bounds better. I love how the actual mouth and the side pieces have been fully painted. It looks so cool. The chest also comes together to look really nice. Sadly, we are missing some of the paint apps that were originally seen on the first version for these faux headlights, but I guess you win some, you lose some, and I would much rather the head be painted when in comparison to a pair of faux headlights here on the sides. We do get some nice stripe detailing for the shoulders. Would have been cool to have seen some metallic highlights to spruce up the detail for the forearms, but still not bad at all. And as we come down here to the legs, we do get some nice silver details for the shins as well as there for the feet, but much like Ironhide, they haven't tweaked the mold at all, so we still do have the rack on his back, but I don't think it looks too bad. Definitely one of the better Ratchet figures that have been released in the past 15 years, and I think it's only the Masterpiece which is vastly superior. Now as we take a look at Bumblebee, this is probably the weakest figure out of the set, not in terms of the molding, but in terms of the paint. This guy sadly looks super cheap. I have no idea as to what they were thinking. Prime and Bumblebee are your most popular characters, especially from the live action movies. They are literally the flag bearers, so it is a shame to see that those figures in particular are massively lacking in terms of paint, and Bumblebee is one of the worst victims of this. So we don't get any kind of stripe detailing here for the chest. I think the shoulders and the arm guards look so bland, and I really think it's a massive shame that they didn't paint the rims in silver. That is really unfortunate, but mold wise he looks exceptional. This does actually have the unmasked head, which I think looks fantastic. We do get the logo there at the top. It's been painted in a really nice metallic gunmetal. I actually think out of all of the times we've seen this head featured, this is one of the better ones, so I may actually take this off after the review and plug it on my old SS49. But as we just take a look here at the lower section, I do think the details are amazing, but the paint apps sadly are severely lacking, especially here for the feet. We don't get any black or yellow, so not the greatest, but mold wise, yeah, it's still a nice Bumblebee. And then the final and probably the best painted in the set is Jazz. Now this guy was incredible when he first came out. I thought it was such a cool fun deluxe, especially considering how small he was. And as you guys can see, they've fully painted him. He's not missing any paint apps when in comparison to his first version, yet he's so much more accurate as they are actually using a much darker, almost gunmetal grey, which looks super cool and really faithful to the Pontiac Solstice used in the movie. Now as we take a look here at the details for the head, I think the visor looks incredible. The amount of detail they were able to sculpt underneath this is remarkable, and check out how much mechanical sculpt work we have here for the shoulders. Undeniably one of the coolest Jazz figures that we've ever seen, and it's a design that not even Michael Bay screwed up. This was undeniably supposed to be Jazz from the G1 series. I think the chest piece looks great. Sadly this section is still a little bit loose, much like was seen on the first version, and to me has always reminded me of an angry pig with the two eyes and the snout here smack bang in the center, but still very nicely detailed. As you guys can see, the shoulders and forearms have been painted super nicely. As we come down here to the lower section, loaded with a ton of mechanical detail and some wicked golden highlights here for the shins, and his blaster actually looks really cool if it wants to stay on, so I'll just very quickly peg that on. As you guys can see, really nice almost mustard gold paint apps there for the barrel, which has got so many blasters attached to it, and I do like the shield design that we have. Now the only issue I had with this mold was that he had a pretty big backpack, but considering he's probably one of the smallest deluxes from the Studio series, I don't think there's much they could do with it, and truth be told, he's definitely a really fun release. Now quickly turning to some comparisons, we have our new 5-pack version here on the left of Optimus Prime, and the original SS32 release here on the right, and they look pretty similar, although there are some questionable paint choices, especially where the shoulders are for this Prime. So as you guys can see, they completely painted these pieces as well as the neck in a glossy blue, whereas on the first release it was just blue plastic, and with that I think that's the key reason why we're not seeing nowhere near as much paint here for the shins. As you guys can see, this looks so much better. Had they taken some of the blue paint for these shoulders and applied it just to these pieces, I think this guy would have been pretty much flawless. He's also sadly missing some silver highlights on the forearms and some blue here for the mid torso, and I also think the clear clearance lights are absent on this version as well. But other than that, most of the paint apps are the same, and the mold in general is just fantastic. So for those of you who are pretty good with a paintbrush, I'm sure you'll have a field day in making this thing look near enough like a masterpiece. Next up, here we have Ironhide, both terrific figures, but in all, I do think that the 5-pack version is slightly more movie accurate. So as we bring them in here for a closer look, as you guys can see, on the first release, they did actually try and paint that battle damaged eye in blue, which didn't look the greatest. It kind of just came out as being a paint mishap. However, this time round, they've just left it silver, which I think looks way better, and it does actually allow you to appreciate some of the sharper details of the sculpt. Now, the only paint that is really missing on this version, when in comparison to this original release, would be that the clearance lights on the back are not painted, and he's also missing some nice silver paint here on the cannons. But considering this time round they have been cast out of a slightly more gunmetal grey, I don't think it looks that bad. And as we compare this one, the paint apps are pretty much the same, and as you guys can see, I just think visually the chest looks a lot better on this version, as so does the feet and the legs in general, as these were just slightly too black when in comparison to the actual CG render. And these pieces here on the side of the shoulders were also fully painted in silver, whereas it was merely just this center section that was picked out on the first release. Be sure to let me know down in the comment section below, out of the two, which is the one that you guys prefer. Comparison wise, for the medical officer Ratchet, here we have our new 5-pack release on the left and the original version on the right. Now, it's not only the paint apps which differ between the two, Hasbro are now using a much darker shade of green on our new release, which personally I think is way more accurate when in comparison to the almost garish neon green that we saw first time round. But as we just very quickly bring them in here for a closer look, as you guys can see, that head sculpt is a marked improvement. This looked pretty terrible, and truth be told, kind of looked like a KO. Now granted, with the additional paint apps that we have here for the face, we are missing some details for the shoulders, as well as here for the midsection, we do get some nice silver for this piece. But something else which is really cool on this version, which we'll see more of in vehicle mode, is that all of the rims have actually been painted in silver, which I think is really cool. And he also includes the same buzzsaw that this release came with. Now granted, it would have been really cool had they given us his EMP blaster, especially considering that they almost flipped the accessories around for Optimus. They gave him his original blades from his first release in comparison to the Iron Blaster. It would have been cool to have seen them give the first release of Ratchet the second release blaster, but nevertheless, I do think that in terms of detail, this one here is vastly superior. Then we turn to Bumblebee, which truth be told is a whole other kettle of fish, as unlike some of the other characters, even Optimus Prime, this guy looks pretty embarrassing when compared to his original standalone release. As you guys can see, the SS-49 looks fantastic. The amount of paint that they put on this guy was pretty mind-blowing, especially when comparing it here to this figure. So as we take a look at the shoulders and the arm guards, this just looks way better. I think the chest also looks really nice with those black stripes that you'd see more of in the Camaro mode. And despite us actually getting the preferred unmasked head on this version, I just think as a whole, this is the better figure. I think the shade of gunmetal grey they use for the plastic is a lot better when in comparison to this very bright, cheap grey that we have for the feet and for the weapons. So truth be told, after this review, I'm probably going to be doing some customization. I'll probably rip off the head of this figure and stick it on this guy, as I just think the paint is way better, and he actually has painted metallic rims when in comparison to just the stark grey that we've got here on this release. But much like Ratchet, be sure to let me know down in the comments, out of the two, which is the one you guys prefer. And last but by no means least, here we have Autobot Jazz, and out of all of the figures in the 5-pack, I think this is undeniably the best painted version, as not only is it a marked improvement when in comparison to its original release, but it doesn't skimp out on paint at all. Every area that we saw on this guy that was painted has still been painted on this new version, which I thought was good. There's no compromises made. Now, as we take a closer look here at the details, as you guys can see, just the shade of silver on this version is way more accurate to the Pontiac Solstice when in comparison to this, which whilst looked great, was just slightly too shiny and reflective. But I do think it's going to come down to personal preference. I really like how this almost mustard gold that we have here pops a lot nicer than this very vague colour that we had first time round on this release, but still, they're both very nice figures. This too is also going to be something that's a personal preference thing as to whether or not you prefer him to be more vibrant or more gunmetal, but if I'm going to give my opinion, I do think the 5-pack release is the better version. And so, with everything just about covered here for the Autobots in their robot modes, without further ado, let's check them out in their vehicle modes. Autobots, transform and roll out! some vehicle mode comparisons, we have the 5-pack release on the left and the original retail release on the right. And as you guys can see, Prime really isn't that different. It really is just the windscreen of which differs and the absence of clearance lights here on the first version. But other than that, the flame details are the same. Pretty much all of the plastic is the same. It is just a little lighter on our new rendition when in comparison to the original version. So this too, I think, is going to come down to personal preference as to which one you guys prefer in the collection. Personally, I much prefer the silver clearance lights that we have here on this version, but really do like the darker tint that we have for the windscreen. Ironhide is pretty much identical in vehicle mode, so the front detail is exactly the same, although as mentioned previously, the darker tint really does help to conceal the bot mode head, which was very visible on the first rendition. It is a shame not to see the detail carried over here for the lights on this version, but other than that, I think this actually looks a lot better, especially as we come around here to the back bumper. I do like how it is grey when in comparison to this one, which was just black, but the detail here is identical. We do get the nice silver smokestacks at the top, and as you guys can see, they do share the exact same undercarriage kibble as they are identical molds. Here we have both versions of Ratchet, so the 5-pack release on the left and the original version on the right. And to go back to my earlier point, I just think the paint apps are a lot more refined on this version when in comparison to the first release. This was just way too thick and chunky when in comparison to the film. None of the rims were decked out in silver, so that didn't look great, and I just think the shade of green in general is a lot more movie accurate here on our new release when in comparison to this version. And just to give you guys a look here from the back, despite this actually having the almost black doors painted, this one does have the bumper, which I actually prefer when in comparison to this, which did look slightly cheap considering that it was just completely green. But yet again, let me know down in the comment section below, out of the two, which one do you prefer, and do you guys prefer the silver lights that we have on this version or the blue as seen on this? And as you guys can see, this one also did have the indicator lights, whereas those are sadly missing on our new 5-pack. Here are both versions of Bumblebee, and as you guys can see, it really is that darker tint for the plastic, which is the major difference between the two. But I do just think this version came together a lot nicer when in comparison to this, which just looks way too gappy, and I much prefer the metallic silver rims that we had on the first version than as opposed to the grey that we're now seeing here on our new 5-pack release. And last up, here we have Jazz, which I actually think is the hidden gem out of this 5-pack. As you guys can see, the shade of gunmetal that we now have on the new release is way more movie accurate when in comparison to the very pristine and vibrant silver that we saw first time round. But both looking fantastic. It's really cool to see that at least for this release there have been no paint apps of which have been skimped, besides the tiny black detail here for the vent, which is absent on this release. But truth be told, it has actually been painted in silver, so I guess it's not that bad at all. And just in general, it is so cool. I really do like the dark tint that we have for the windscreen than as opposed to the very light blue that we saw first time round. And so, some final thoughts for the Transformers Studio Series 15th Anniversary Autobots 5-pack. Overall, much like the Devastator box set that was released 2 years ago, I think this is a fantastic set. Not only does it give collectors a second opportunity in picking up all of the Autobots in one accumulative set, but it also gives those who perhaps missed out on some of the more elusive releases, such as Ironhide and Optimus, an opportunity to pick them up at a slightly more reasonable price. When you put it into perspective that this box set costs roughly $150 for all 5 figures, and on the aftermarket, Ironhide just in himself is retailing anywhere between $100 to $300, this is a no-brainer. I think it's a great opportunity for those to pick up both Prime and Ironhide, 2 of the more rarer to find Studio Series figures, and the other 3 are also really nicely done. If you're a fan of the live action movies, you missed out on Ironhide or Optimus Prime, then I really do think this is going to be a great set for you, and especially with Christmas more or less just around the corner, I think this is going to be a really nice pickup. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you guys think about these figures when in comparison to their original standalone releases? And what do you guys think in regards to Hasbro reissuing some of the more harder to find Studio Series figures, and who would you like to see them reissue next? As always, I thank you all so much for watching. Until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.